Just heard the exasperated phrase "we only get to see them on their terms," by user Kaitlin. So I was out to eat last night at a nice but small restaurant. I won't pretend I'm not nosy, but I didn't need to be because the close quarters meant you could hear every word of the conversation going on next to you, and that's when I heard this gem. It was two couples, in their 60s or 70s, discussing family and the holidays. One lady talked about how much seeing her family meant to her and how she would do anything to see them more. Then she described in detail how her very young grandchild was still taking naps and how the whole holiday had to be planned around their schedule. It's absolutely ridiculous. We only get to see them on their terms. And they never want to visit. I'm not going to lie, sometimes I read posts here and they sound made up. Now I know how completely wrong I was. Maybe just follow the sleep schedule, grandma, and maybe your kids won't mind visiting. Update, by user Arcana Cobalt. Here's the original. I hope I did this right. https://www.reddit.com/r/entitledparents/s/2oida9vgfc. Back with an update. The mom and three boys were back. I saw them come in pretty soon after my shift started. I decided to give them exactly one chance, to see if they learned. They in fact did not. They tried to avoid me all day, but I don't think they understand how cameras work. I caught them almost running over a 5-year-old girl going down the slides, incorrectly as well, and rushed over to them as fast as I could. I caught them coming out of the catch area smiling and laughing. They saw me coming towards them and tried to get out. I brought security with me. Specifically, an ex-Marine that works for us that everyone simply calls Enforcer, we'll call him Jason, due to his blatant lack of fucks and his unwillingness to give any. He stood in their way, standing at about 6'5", weighing about 180 pounds of muscle. They stopped dead in their tracks. I caught them, and then found their mom. I brought Jason over and the entire situation was over in a matter of minutes. Decent amount of harassment from the mom as well as an attempt of physical assault on Jason. She missed thankfully, or she wouldn't have an arm anymore, and they were promptly told to pack and leave. Their stay would be refunded for one night, but not the full stay. I would have kept everything, but policy is policy, and they were angrily escorted by two very unhappy security guards, back to their car. People never learn. Writing this when we finally have some downtime. It's a busy one today, sold out rooms, 400, and over 300 passes. Edit, I can already see people telling me that Jason can press charges and he told me, and I quote, I would, but I feel like she doesn't have anything worth taking. God bless that man. Edit 2, I thought Jason was 180 pounds, and while he is 6'5", he saw this post on his break because I told him I'd be posting it and confronted me by saying, you do know you have to change that, right? I said what? To which he responded, I don't weigh 180. I used to weigh 187, then I joined up. I weigh 254 now. Change that and you get an upvote from me. And of course, I want that man's approval, so I'm putting it in the edits, lol. BF's entitled Parents walked out of his show because of my costume, by user Angeloff Music 5. My now fiancé, Jim, and I have always been rocky with his parents. I have no contact with my family due to abuse, and met Jim's parents at a very uncertain and scary time for me. They never particularly liked me, and thought I was weird because of how nervous I was. However, I had good reason. Jim still lived with them at the time, and I had heard a lot about how controlling they were. His dad had some issues with looking at inappropriate content and lying about in the past that I won't fully go into, but basically never took accountability for it. Jim's mom, Becky, not only enabled him, but projected onto Jim and became hyper-controlling in his teenage years. She assumed he would do the same thing just because he was male, and didn't let him watch any movies where a woman wore tight clothes, even cartoons. Aladdin was not allowed because of Jasmine's design. It even got to the point where Happy Feet was banned because the penguins moved too sexily. Jim was also not allowed to have Instagram or Facebook until he was 18 for fear he might see inappropriate pictures. These same restrictions were not placed on his sister. Jim's first relationship, which happened when he was 18, ended because the girl could not stand how awful Becky was. She grounded him from seeing her for a week because he posted a photo of them kissing. Jim was stuck obeying because he wasn't financially able to move out and was still caught in the process of realizing how extreme this was. When the girl broke up with him, his mom refused to admit she had a role in it and just ignored him while he struggled with severe depression for several months. and later told him he had hurt the family by spending a lot of time in his room trying to process everything. I met Jim through my family's business, we became best friends and then fell in love. He helped me break out of abuse and gain independence, another story, and we've been together ever since. When I met his family, Becky wasn't as hard on me as she had been on his first girlfriend, but it was bad enough. She criticized every move I made, always behind my back. I talked too much, didn't talk enough, didn't make enough eye contact, didn't look like I was listening, there was always a problem. When Jim tried to stick up for me, she would just overrule him and insist she was right. If he tried to explain she was making me nervous, she got offended because she wasn't doing anything to make me nervous. I was just trying to act like she was my mother. Her other biggest issue was with my clothes. She is extremely picky about what women should wear, especially curvy women. I wasn't allowed to wear anything below my collarbone in her house because I would be tempting her struggling husband to look. I am curvy, with a big bust and big hips, and she didn't particularly like that Jim chose a curvy girl at all. My butt and leggings was a problem, but they also poked fun at me for wearing skirts, which I actually like to do. I have a chronic pain condition that makes jeans really uncomfortable to wear, so I was a lot of times at a loss as to what they wanted from me. I of course dresses the way I wanted to outside of her home, but she would see my Facebook photos and complain. I thought about unfriending her, but that would have caused so much offense, I didn't want to put Jim through it. He was already dealing with getting treated badly by his sister, unfairly by his dad, and trying to juggle college and getting a second job to be able to move out, and I just wanted there to be as little drama as possible just until we could get a place together. We also started to notice her rules were very inconsistent. Jim's sister, Cindy, would wear things I definitely wouldn't be permitted to wear in Becky's house. Becky indicated this was because Cindy was more petite. This made it clear her problem wasn't even with my clothing style, it was with my body, which made me very uncomfortable. Clothes are one thing, but I can't change the size and shape of my hips and boobs. So fast forward a little, to when Cindy began dating a guy. We expected her to go through what Jim and I went through upon introduction, but they didn't. Becky fell all over Cindy's boyfriend, welcomed him with open arms, made up cute nicknames for him, and literally would gaze at him while we sat at the table. Jim and I figured she was living vicariously through Cindy, or just plain liked him because she has always shown signs of preferring Cindy to Jim. She didn't like any girl Jim was ever interested in, but absolutely adored Cindy's guy. Another note, she had an issue with everything with me, but Cindy's guy was a different religion than her. Based on all Becky's opinions and views, that should have been a huge problem, but she didn't seem to care in the slightest. Jim was really hurt by the difference. We weren't allowed to do anything other than hold hands around them. If we hugged or put arms around each other, Becky would complain and tell Jim we needed to act like friends. But Cindy could straight up slap her guy's butt in the kitchen and Becky acted like it was cute. That and a mix of other little things blew up, and Jim and I put a deposit down on an apartment. Of course holy hell blew up at the prospect of Jim living with me unmarried, but Becky realized he was seriously and seemed to calm down out of worry she might lose a relationship. After moving out, things got better. We saw them about once a month or for holidays instead of every Sunday. We all got along better, they seemed genuinely happy to see us, for about 2 months. Cindy began pulling her entitled crap again, Jim's dad began being overly authoritarian, and Becky started nitpicking again. It didn't get far before the big issue started. Jim does a lot of theater, and we got involved with a production of Macbeth. Jim was CO directing and I was Lady Macbeth. Jim adores Shakespeare and this was a big deal, but it also became a very stressful process. We got stuck putting together costumes last minute that we hadn't known would be our responsibility. We had been told to get a flashy red formal gown for me to wear in the banquet scene. I found the highest quality one I could afford, that still had a full skirt and wasn't stretchy and cheap. It was off the shoulder and showed some cleavage. I asked Jim if it was okay since his mom would come to the show. He said I don't care, they've been to my shows where girls wore low-cut stuff before. They'll complain, but I don't have to plan my show around her opinions. I wore the dress, they came to the show and walked out at intermission. The entire cast was shocked. I only wore the dress for 15 minutes, on a tall stage from 30 feet away from them. It wasn't that bad. Everyone was extremely supportive of Jim, which was great, but we knew it wasn't over yet. The fact that his mom was willing to walk out in the middle of a show Jim directed, when she knew how much theater means to him, floored me. When she called him a few days later, she was self-righteous and accusatory, calling him a bad boyfriend for letting me go on stage like that and claiming he did it on purpose. Jim told her it was literally the best one we could find and she said she didn't believe him. He began pointing out all her inconsistencies, how she still watches Titanic and Pearl Harbor because she likes them. And how she didn't leave other family events when girls there were dressed in lower cut stuff than me. It was just because it was me. She began gaslighting and denying she'd said things, said she was perfectly justified to leave the show, and we were wrong to have a problem with it. She said we were choosing to take offense when she was just speaking truth. Jim told her yes, them leaving was a consequence of our actions, but us having a problem was a consequence of theirs, and she needed to put herself in our shoes and take some accountability. It ended with nothing getting resolved. A few days later, I ran across a very good article about how society treats women when men look at them in gross ways. How we need to stop transferring the shame to the women and remember that even in the Bible, Jesus said to pluck out your eye if you are looking at a woman with lustful thoughts, not to tell the woman to change her clothes. I reshared the article because I liked it. Cue Becky blowing up publicly on the post, about what about the hurt wife of the man who has to see him look at the inappropriate woman? Why does no one care about her? I replied as politely as I could, pointing out that wasn't the topic of this particular post, and there are plenty of resources for wives of men who struggle. Therapy, church groups, support groups, etc., while people mainly point fingers at the women who get objectified, many of whom don't even know they're being looked at. Or, like me, get objectified no matter how we dress. I get hit on at work when I'm wearing a black polo. Becky continued on with a berating lecture and I snapped back, telling her I was tired of her criticism and that I'm perfectly within my rights to share my opinion on this subject, considering she does that constantly and I never berate her publicly when I disagree. We switched to texting and continued arguing for a few texts. Jim's dad finally showed himself in a few nasty texts to Jim as well, which was bold considering his past behavior caused this entire issue for the family and he's never apologized. Then, without giving me time to respond, Becky texted Jim and told him she was cutting contact until we had a change of heart. Jim was furious and sent them each a final message detailing all the crap they did and gaslit him about for years, and said maybe some distance would be beneficial. We had our own little no-stress Thanksgiving, and then Jim proposed to me. It had been well known that he was going to propose, but Jim didn't reach out or tell his family when he was going to, except for his grandmother who lives out of state. His family said nothing, didn't reach out or anything. Which was pretty normal for them, as they always refused to acknowledge our dating anniversary or any smaller couples' milestones in the past. Then just before Christmas, Becky reached out. She told Jim a package had been accidentally delivered to their house, and cheerfully invited him to come over because they'd love to see him. Jim was even angrier at this because not only were they not acknowledging this milestone in his life and not acknowledging me at all, but they were just acting like nothing had happened and like things should just pop back to normal. He told his mom, "Don't think that would be a good idea since I haven't had a change of heart." She responded by saying she didn't know what he was talking about and trying to rephrase her contact-cutting text. He proceeded to ignore her since gaslighting is such a pattern, and there's no talking to her when she does that. He hasn't responded and doesn't feel ready to reach out, and they haven't said anything else. Our wedding is set for October and the save the dates are going out in March, so they have 3 months to shape up or they will not be invited. Neither of us really want them there, a case of love them but don't like them for Jim and genuine dislike for me. But of course if they make nice we will invite them. But there's going to have to be accountability and acceptance of our alternate views, and we seriously don't see that happening. Waterpark Karen, by user Arkana Cobalt. It's been a while since I posted, but I'm back with a good one. As a reminder, I'm a lifeguard at a waterpark and I deal with Karens a lot. But recently I was actually promoted to head guard, aka manager, which is a whole new ballpark. This is something that happened today. I worked a 14.5-hour shift, so I saw a lot, but nothing pissed me off more than this. So, down to the story. I started the day with the basic head guard stuff, starting the water up, writing the guard rotation, etc. We opened at 9, like we usually do, and it was good until about 10:12 specifically. A family came in. A mom, dad, young daughter, and 3 teenage boys, all about 17 to 18. Immediately the boys were trouble for my guards. I got at least 10 complaints about them, but they were staggered. They were going from one half to a different half every time they'd get in trouble because there's no communication between halves. Regardless, it reached its tipping point at 4 o'clock, just into the second shift. I also need to add, I am infamous among the staff for the way I deal with Karens, entitled kids, and rude guests. I have zero tolerance. Anyway, back to the story. I heard a long loud double whistle while checking the cameras in the first aid room. That means one of three things: accident, injury, or attention. I headed over to see a fuming mother screaming at one of my guards, in fact one of my friends from when I was a normal guard, so I was immediately on edge with this one. I came up, and asked her, "Can I help with something?" M for entitled mom, me for, well me. M yes, this bitch. Me let's watch the language. Exasperated sigh. M this guard banned my son and his friends from this slide for no reason. I looked over. It was them. The thorns in my side. Me ah. I see. Guard name, watch your water, I can handle this. I turned back to the mom. Me ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. Your son and his friends aren't banned from the slide. M so then why? I raised a hand to continue. Me they're banned from the park. She exploded. Why this, why that, you asshole, blah blah the works. Eventually she calmed down and said why. They haven't done anything wrong. Me actually they've broken nearly every rule we have, and have been causing problems all day. M what have they really done? What could they have possibly? Me they've endangered themselves, other guests, and my lifeguards with their reckless behavior. M, frankly enraged, how have they endangered people? Me, started to get worked up, they've gone down every slide the wrong way, jumped out halfway down, nearly hit people while playing dodgeball with the basketballs, which is against the rules anyway, and I have guards posted at the bottom of every slide. Them coming out incorrectly endangers my guards. They easily could have given themselves and nearly everyone around them concussions or at worst broken bones. They need to leave. Well we paid for a room for 2 nights. Me, increasingly angry, and that isn't a problem. You, your husband, and your daughter can all stay and enjoy the park. The boys however have to leave. They can either be taken home by one of you, or they can stay in their room for the rest of the night. M, flabbergasted and trying to regain control but what ab. Me, done with her shit, ma'am, I don't know what gave you the impression this was a debate. You are in no position to argue. You are in a position to comply. So, if they don't leave in the next 10 minutes, they will be removed. She stood there for a moment, in shock, then got uppity and went to the hot tub. I decided she didn't get the 10 if she wasn't going to use them. I took my walkie out and said head guard to security desk. Code yellow. That's the code for guest removal. They came in, we found the kids, took them to their parents, and then escorted them to their rooms while they were still drying themselves off. I may have been a bit of a dick, not gonna lie, but she was being combative and I had other more important things to do. Because of her I was late on my chems check, checking chlorine levels in the water, flow state, etc., so I was done with the entire situation. On top of that she called my friend and employee a bitch, so that doesn't slide. Edit, I did the math, it was actually 15.5 hours I just left. Edit 2, update is officially live. Parents assumed I'd be with them over Christmas and are trying every tactic they can to guilt me, by user array. I've been going low contact, and deciding not to go home was genuinely terrifying for me. However, I made a plan with my therapist, booked tickets to stay with friends abroad and committed to dodging the genuinely debilitating stress of family Christmas. Multiple friends took me aside last January because doing Christmas with family completely wrecked my mental health for weeks. Even though I knew they would push me to cancel, I told my family I wouldn't be down 4 months ago. I think they thought I'd give in to pressure to stay, picking holes in my plans as much as they could, making me feel like I'd be burdened to my hosts, that my health issues would be worse, that it may be the last Christmas with some specific family members. This was after a brief period of being angry with me for not giving them enough notice. Now they're making a point of bickering and guilting me in our family group chat. Saying how much my vulnerable younger brother misses me, but not anyone else. Implying I'm selfish for avoiding their shitty Christmas because they had to endure a miserable holiday and it's unfair for me to enjoy my day. If anyone has advice for how to deal with holiday complications, I'd love them. This is making even the things I'm enjoying have a sour taste.